Song of Solomon, an introduction. The Song of Solomon outline. The courtship is from chapter 1 to 2, chapter 3 to 5, and the wedding chapters 3 to 6 and to chapter 5 verse 1, and then the maturing marriage is chapters 5 verse 2 and to chapter 8 verse 14. The main emphasis in the first part of the courtship is the bride muses about her beloved. In the second part, the wedding, from chapter 3 to 5, the groom speaks tenderly to his bride. That is the emphasis. And at the maturing marriage, the wife longs for and describes her loving husband. Then the husband speaks of his wife in intimate terms, and both the partners declare a permanent seal on their love. The chief speaker in the first part, the courtship, is the bride, the darling. The chief speaker in the second part, the wedding, is the bridegroom or the beloved. And the maturing marriage, the first part, the chief speaker is first the wife, the darling, then the husband, the beloved, and finally the duets speak. The theme in the entire book is the joy in the intimacy of love within the committed marriage relationship. The key verse is chapter 8, verse 7. Christ in Song of Songs, it foreshadows the bridegroom relationship of Christ with his church. Another way of looking at it as dividing the focus into cultivating love and acclaiming love. The divisions are as follows. Under cultivating love, we have the admiration of the lovers and the invitation to love. That is, chapter 1 is admiration of lovers, and chapter 2 to 3 is the invitation to love. Chapter 4 is the declaration of love, and chapter 5 is the exaltation of love. The topics covered under admiration of the lovers is falling in love. The topic under invitation to love is united in love. The topic under declaration of love is divided in love, and topic under exaltation of love is devoted in love. So the first two parts are fostering love, and the next two parts is faithfulness in love. The main place where this takes place is Jerusalem. The time about 950 BC, and the author is King Solomon. Another way of looking at the outline is there's courtship, love anticipated, that is chapter 1 verse 1 to chapter 3 verse 5, marriage, love that is consummated, chapter 3 verse 6 to chapter 5 verse 1, the separation, love rejected, chapter 5 verse 2 to 7, the restoration, the love is rekindled, chapter 5 verse 8 to chapter 6 verse 13, the devotion, love is grown, chapter 7 verse 1 to chapter 8 verse 14. The beginnings of love in the courtship and the marriage love consummated parts. Then the deepening of love takes place when the separation of love, restoration and rekindling and devotion of love is grown. The main theme is the Song of Songs is a celebration of marital love as ordained by God. Author is Solomon, speaker Solomon, the Shulamite, and the chorus of women and God. The key word is the beloved, used 32 times. The key verse is 2:16, 6:3 and 7:10. Another way of looking at it is the main focus can be from chapter 1 to chapter 5 is the beginning of love, and chapter 5 to chapter 8 is broadening of love. The divisions are first falling in love, chapter 1 verse 1 to chapter 3 verse 5, then the united in love, chapter 3 verse 6 to chapter 5 verse 1, then struggling in love, chapter 5 verse 2 to chapter 7 verse 10, and then we have growing in love, chapter 7 verse 11 to chapter 8 verse 14. So the stages are courtship, wedding, problems and progress. That is fostering of love, fulfillment of love, frustration of love and faithfulness. The place is Israel and time is 1 year. The Song of Song can be looked at historically about the courtship and marriage of Solomon and a Sodomite shepherdess. She is considered to be the 74th wife of Solomon. Practically, it was used as a manual by young Hebrew newlyweds to know how to properly feel about sexuality, something God gave them. Allegorically, symbolically, it is about the courtship and the marriage of Christ and his people. Or Old that Testament, we have God and Israel, and New Testament, Christ and the church. Chapter 1 verse 1 to chapter 5 verse 1, the beginning of love. First is we have falling in love, chapter 1 verse 1 to chapter 3 verse 5. There's bride's longing for affection, expressions of mutual love, visit of the king to the bride's home and the bride's dream of separation. Under united in love, chapter 3 verse 6 to chapter 5 verse 1, there is a wedding procession. The bride's beauty is praised and the marriage is consummated. The next is the broadening of love, chapter 5, verse 2 to chapter 8, verse 14. The struggling in love, chapter 5, verse 2 to chapter 7, verse 10. The bride's second dream of separation. The bridegroom's handsomeness is praised and bride's beauty is praised. Then the growing in love of chapter 7, verse 11 to chapter 8, verse 14. Bride's desire to visit her home and a journey and homecoming. The main aspects of this relationship are there's attraction, desire, companionship, pleasure, union, separation, faithfulness, and praise. This is like a drama which is written primarily from the point of view of the Shulamite woman. The characters and the speakers are the bride, the Shulamite, the beloved, or the bridegroom, which is Solomon. The chorus are the daughters of Jerusalem. The bride, the Shulamite, is a hard-working shepherdess, dark-skinned from working the sun, perhaps a woman. 141 of Solomon. There are about 60 queens and 80 concubines of Solomon. It almost most of Solomon's wives and concubines were political arrangements. Then perhaps this one is his only pure romance up to that point. The main message from this book is view sexuality as God does, something that is good but designed to be used only within the boundaries of marriage. Secondly, understand that men usually have a stronger sexual drive than women, and without this, few men would ever marry, and the human race would probably die out. So God planned it this way. Thirdly, the purpose of marriage from God's point of view is to produce godly offspring. Malachi 2 verse 15. Looking from a human perspective, we must avoid music, TV shows and movies that excite our passions. Flee your youthful lust, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. 2 Timothy verse 2:22. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul says it's better not to marry, but if you can't control yourself, it's not sin to marry. Suppose you and your husband can't control your sexual desires when you are apart from each other, then unless he insists you be here, don't live apart from each other. Don't gamble. You are only asking for more trouble, heartbreaks, pain, and regret because there is no communication gap, and then there leads to more frustration and negativity in the spouses. God will hold you partly responsible if there is adultery committed in the relationship. The Song of Song portrays the triumph of genuine, pure love. Material wealth is not love. Song of Solomon, chapter 3, verse 6 to 10. Who is this coming out of the wilderness like pillars of smoke, perfume with myrrh and frankincense, with all the merchants' fragrant powders? Behold, it is Solomon's coach with 60 valiant men around it, of the valiant of Israel. The bride, a hard-working shepherd girl with a rough home life. The bridegroom is a handsome and stately shepherd. The text doesn't explicitly say whether or not it's Solomon is the bridegroom, but the bride does make reference to Solomon's wedding parade in a Song of Song chapter 3 verses 6 to 11. And the chorus is the community of people celebrating the bride and the bridegroom's love and union. In this outline, we see the first part, the preparation for the wedding from chapter 1 to chapter 3. The bride prepares, that is chapter 1 to chapter 3 verse 5, and then the groom is preparing chapter 3 verse 6 to verse 11. Then the second part, the couple profess their love and desire. The groom professes his love in chapter 4, then the bride professes her love and love in chapter 5, and finally in the third part both are united in love, chapter 6 to 8. The Song of Solomon, being a poetic language, uses many comparisons and similes and metaphors to describe the beauty of the man and the woman. These are used to praise their overall appearance. For example, the temples are like pomegranates, the hair of the women are like royal tapestry, the nose like a tower, teeth like a flock of sheep, the neck like the Tower of David, the breast like clusters of fruit, the waist is a mound of wheat, and the legs like jewels. The overall appearance is one of Pharaoh's horses. And in the man, the head is the purest gold, the eyes are like doves, the lips are like lily, cheeks are like beds of spice, arms are rods of gold, body like polished ivory, legs are pillars of marble, feet are bases of pure gold, and overall appearance is like the land of Lebanon. Song of Songs is not exactly wisdom literature in the strict sense of the term. However, there is a common opinion that this book is a product of the wisdom author because the book is attributed to King Solomon. Moreover, the theme of the book is human love, which is a concern of the wise who compiled the wisdom literature. The graphic representation of the male and the female figures in this book has been the cause of embarrassment. If these imageries are to be understood and interpreted literally, then it becomes more embarrassing. If the imageries are allegories, example the navel in the 7:2 stands for the baptismal font, then question arises, why are this type of imageries employed? So this book always remains a riddle. The features. This book has altogether 117 verses, out of which 56 verses are ascribed to a female speaker. Some 119 alone has 176 verses. Yet this book has a good amount of literature written in it. For example, Marvin Pope's commentary in the Anchor Bible series has about 740 pages, out of which 280 pages are devoted just for this introduction. The second point is God is never mentioned by name in this book. The third point, the entire content of the book is put in the mouth of the speakers, that is the maiden, the youth and the daughters, who are never identified or introduced. The change of speakers is to be guessed. There are three speakers or characters, the woman, the man and the daughters of Jerusalem. It is possible to identify two men, namely a king in verse 1:4 and a shepherd, verse 1:7-8. So the woman has to choose between the two men. However, this book is not a drama with a traditional eternal triangle. Therefore, it is probable that there is only one man, sometimes identified as a king and sometimes as a shepherd. Calling him king or shepherd is part of the romantic poetry. The woman is also sometimes called sister and sometimes the bride in chapter 4, verses 9-12. Point 4 is that what the characters are speaking is meant to form dialogues, but it is in fact monologues, so it is difficult to know to whom one is speaking to. The fifth point is the book has no structure, hence the reader cannot perceive a movement within the book. 6 is the geographical indications marked in the book are very confusing. These indications cover most of the ancient Near East. And the seventh point, there are 49 words occurring only once in the Bible. In Greek language, such words are called hapex legomena. Translation and interpretation of hapex legomena are a problem. The title, the book has three titles, namely the Song of Songs in the Hebrew Bible, the Song of Solomon in the Greek Septuagint Bible, and the Canticle of Canticles in the Latin or Vulgate Bible. The author is said to be King Solomon. Name is many places in the title in 1, 5, 3, 7, 9, 8, 11-12, but this is a pseudepigraphy, that is attributing a literary work to a renowned person who is actually not the author. The book is a collection of poems which are edited and connected. The poem may be composed by multiple authors with a single overall editor who is anonymous. The date of the book, if the book is taken as a collection of number of poems, various strata can be detected as far as the date is concerned. The earlier composition must have come from the monarchical times and the last ones from around 400 BC. So that is the post-exilic times. The monarchical times are the times of the king around 1000 BC, King Saul, King David, Solomon. The canonicity of this book, that is making it part of the Bible. The Jewish canon was fixed in the Council of Jamnia in AD 90, where this book found a place in the canon, perhaps because of the tradition of King Solomon's authorship. The Christians accept all the books in the Palestinian canon fixed at Jamnia by the Jews. The interpretation can be many-fold. Firstly, we have allegorical interpretation. The word allegory comes from a Greek word allegorio, meaning to hint at something other than what is being said. The words used stand for some meaning other than the obvious meaning. So, allegory is a narrative to be interpreted with transferred meaning. Allegorical interpretation presupposes that the text under consideration is a coded one. Therefore, the text needs decoding, for which a hermeneutic key is required. It is said that the author wrote this book with an entirely different meaning in mind. In Judaism, we have Rabbi Akiba, who died in AD 135, who saw this book as an allegory of relationship between God and Israel. In Jewish Targums, which are Aramaic paraphrases, this book was interpreted as a historical allegory describing the events from the Exodus onwards. After the book was accepted into the canon, its interpretation was influenced by the law and the prophets. So, fidelity to Yahweh by keeping the covenant relationship unbroken was the main concern of the law and the prophets. The best analogy to depict this covenant relationship between Yahweh and Israel was the relationship between a man and a woman. When Christianity accepted this book, Christianity took over the prevailing allegorical method of interpreting the book. So, Christ becomes the lover and the church the beloved. The book has been allegorized in two ways, namely in parts or as a whole. Firstly, allegorization of the book in parts. Here, the understanding is that each detail of the poem gets a transferred meaning. In other words, each name, each place, each thing, and each person is symbolically explained. For example, the maiden is identified with Israel and the church. The man's banqueting house in chapter 2, verses 4 is Sinai for the Jews and altar for the Christians. For the Jews, the maiden's teeth in chapter 4, verses 2 are the priests and the Levites who ate the temple sacrifices. For the Jews, the maiden lips in chapter 4, verse 3 are the high priest saying prayers on the Day of Atonement. For the Christians, the red color of the lips is the blood of Christ. The maiden's navel in chapter 7, verse 2 is the baptismal font for the Christians. The maiden's breasts are Moses and Aaron's for the Jews, the two testament for the Christians, love of God and love of neighbor for both, two cherubim on the ark of the covenant for the Jews. For one, Targum kissing verse 1 2 is the giving of the law at Sinai. For the Jews, the man's body in 5:14 is the book of Leviticus, which remains at the center of the Torah. The man's leg 5:15 are the pillars in the temple for the Jews. For a Jewish rabbi, seeking in chapter 3 verse 1 is the Israelites looking for the ark captured by the Philistines. For Saint Cyril of Alexandria, who is a church father, seeking is a woman seeking for Christ on the Easter morning. For the Jews, the maiden's awakened heart in chapter 5 verse 2 is Israel's sin and punishment during exile. From the above mentioned example, it is obvious that there cannot be much of a common agreement on such interpretations of details. The second, allegorization of the book as a whole. The book speaks of the love relationship between the lover and the beloved. The Jewish circles interpret the lover as Yahweh and the beloved as Israel. According to Orthodox Christian view, the lover is Christ and beloved is the church. However, in the Old Testament, allegorical speech are usually not made without indications in the context. For example, when marriage is used as an allegory of the relationship between Yahweh and Israel, it is informed. This book gives no indication at all that it is an allegory. No reason is given for the separation and the reunion of the lover and the beloved. An allegory presupposes a narrative structure. This book does not have narrative structure. The question still persists, namely, why did the author choose such physical, anatomical imageries to describe relationship between Yahweh and Israel or Christ and the church? In the book, there are no negative references like adultery or infidelity. There is no ununanimous agreement about any allegorical interpretation. Therefore, the question remains, which is most important is which interpretation had the author intended. We have L. Stadelmann, a German, in his work Love and Politics, claims that this book is a political allegory. The theme of this book is the hermeneutic key. The theme is the desire of both people and the land of Judah for the restoration of the Davidic dynasty after the exile. So the lover is the Davidic dynasty, the maiden is the people, and the land of Judah or the daughters of Jerusalem are the elite of Judah. Now, parts of the maiden's body can be interpreted as geographical parts of the land of Judah. The literal interpretation is the second way of interpreting this book. It takes the literal or obvious meaning of the text. According to the literal interpretation, this book is a praise of human love which involves sex. The word love occurs 28 times in this book, but the Greek language there are three words denoting love, that is eros, philia and agape. The word eros is not used in this Bible. The eros means passionate, possessive love related to sexual intercourse. Philia is the love between friends. The noun form is philia and the verb form is phileo. The verb form occurs more often in the Bible. Agape means love in general. Agape is noun form and agapao is the verb form. Both these forms occur 14 times in the book. This book is a collection of love songs celebrating the love between man and woman. These songs may have been sung at wedding ceremonies, celebration, or at premarital gatherings. Love is a universal theme. The book does not tell a story or teach a lesson. The lovers continue to speak of love. Hiding, seeking, finding, union, separation, and longing are expressions of love. Through this book, the biblical authors reiterate the special place that God has given to love between man and woman. Love between man and woman brings them together, inspiring them to dedicate their lives to each other and supporting them mutually to sanctify each other. The third interpretation is the more than the literal interpretation. The more than the literal interpretation is spiritual, mystical, theological, extended, fuller interpretation which was not intended by the author. The spiritual interpretation of meaning is an extended meaning going beyond the obvious meaning. The literal interpretation does not exhaust the meaning of the text. Every text has an afterlife in the community. It is in the community that the theological or mystical interpretation of the text generates. Even when the author of this book is meant to be a song of human love, a surplus meaning is acquired by the book as it is handed down among the community of believers. The living tradition of Christianity discovers new meaning and new depth and new application in this sacred text. Thus, the love relationship between Yahweh and Israel, Christ and the church, God and the individual should be taken as an extended meaning which the Jewish and the Christian interpreters have given to the book. Such love relationship should not be understood as allegorically intended by the author of the book. So, therefore, it could also be a beyond and a more transferred meaning, a meaning of our own journey of the soul with respect to God, our journey of the spiritual life, etc. May our Blessed Mother always teach us the true meaning of love.